What's happening, guys? Welcome back to the YouTube channel. My name is Adam, also known as the Plant Power Coach. Today, I'm joined by Jaime from Jaime's Corner. How are you doing today, Jaime?
Hi, thanks so much for having me. Doing really good.
Honestly, the pleasure is all mine. Thank you so much for your time today as well. And I don't say that lightly. You've got like, from what I can tell on YouTube, Instagram, your following seems to be growing and growing and growing. That's how I've kind of come across you as well. But for anyone who doesn't know you, potentially some of my followers, can you just give us a little bit of an intro of yourself and essentially how we got here today?
Yeah, for sure. So, hi everyone. My name's Jaime Logan. I'm a New York City-based animal rights activist. I also am a campaign manager at Generation Vegan. I have my own YouTube and podcast. And I also most recently am hosting PETA's new podcast called Just So You Know. And my work really stems to get people thinking about their daily choices concerning particularly who they're eating, and to really just wake people up to some of the world's most I want to say cruel issues of this world. And I find that issues related to animal rights, they tend to intersect with so many different topics, from the environment to health to human rights, and of course animal welfare and cruelty. And so my work tries to use my own personality and humor and fun and also education to get people thinking and awaken them to the message.
Absolutely. And I think it's fair to say that as a guest on this channel, a lot of the reason I invited you was about your activism towards the vegan movement as well. If I could summarize the sort of channel that I have here as well, I guess in some way, shape, or form, it's my form of activism. We tie in fitness, plant-based nutrition, as well as veganism. Those three sort of things that I just mentioned now really quickly before I dive into the activism aspect. What's your philosophy on fitness and plant-based nutrition and veganism, those three things separately?
So yeah, I think it all ties in together. And I think that there's this, misconception that the health, the environment, and the animals are completely separate. And while I am completely vegan for the animals, like no two ways about it, if it was unhealthy, I would still be vegan. But I think that we as activists and people that are speaking up in this movement and on the front lines, I think we have a responsibility to maintain our health and to show people the positive aspects and the benefits of a plant-based lifestyle. So it does all kind of intersect. And so my philosophy is take care of yourself. And I think in any forms of activism, we need that solid foundation of different practices and exercises that ground you, that stabilize you, so that you can be a voice for the animals in the long run.
Absolutely. And to extend on that as well, I think it's about breaking stereotypes. If you're going to be like an unhealthy vegan, you're potentially walking into like their sort of beliefs of stereotypes of what vegans are like, which I think is really, really important to understand that you can be healthy and you can be a vegan, but potentially you can be unhealthy as well. And it's important to look after yourself. And we can do that through fitness, plant-based nutrition, and activism. Uh, Next bit, I'm going to just read off what I've got so far. You've produced 6 short films pertaining to animal rights that have got over 75 million views. You've attended and organized hundreds of demos and protests. You crashed the Coach Runway fashion show. You have your own podcast, YouTube channel. That's where I kind of found you. Where you educate people in the public. Highly entertaining. I love it. That's easily one of the most amounts of activism that we've had on this channel. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. Yeah. So my activism journey has spanned over 6.5 years, I would say. And it might sound overwhelming to some people, but it definitely was spread out. And it was definitely a process of finding what works for me. Because I think it's super important to recognize that some of the actions that one person takes, another person might not be comfortable with, but they can still be just as effective doing something in their own way. So when I first became vegan, it was very much I did it for the animals, but I also didn't want to stir the pot. I was kind of quiet. I still attended dinners that had animal products, and I still was very quiet about it. Most people didn't even know that I was vegan for the first 6 months that I was. And so then it sort of turned into this dilemma where I said, well, if I really feel super passionate about what's happening to the animals, and passionate about speaking up against what's happening, I have to do something about it.
Mm.
And so that's when I realized I can't just stay idle and watch as these horrific things happen to them. So it started off by I attended an anonymous for the voiceless cube, which is basically where you stand with a TV screen and you show standard practices of what happens to the animals before they get to our plates. And I just remember standing there with the TV screen. I was in San Francisco. I was with my cousin Alex and her husband Forrest, and they have been vegans for many years. And so when I went vegan, she was like, "Come out to San Francisco." I live in New York City, and she was like, "Come to San Francisco. We want to show you some of the food and activism that we're a part of." And I realized that this is such an amazing community. It's so much bigger than I thought it was. And so I attended that first demonstration, and then it led to many other ones, many other anonymous for the voiceless cubes, many other educational conversations where I realized, wow, like I am changing people's lives. I'm extending their lives, basically their health, by telling them switch to a whole foods plant-based diet, you'll feel better. And not only that, but you'll be helping animals in the process. And so then I met people that were going to fur demonstrations, people that were attending different kinds of protests, whether it was going into a grocery store with the footage and showing people where those products are coming from.
Mm.
And then I met a person that said, "Come to a slaughterhouse with me. Come to a slaughterhouse vigil." And I just remember thinking to myself, I could never do that. I don't think I could, like, just
Mm.
to see them there. And eventually, after letting it sit with me for a bit, I decided I was ready, because I think it's important to document the conditions of what the animals are going through to show people this is where your food's coming from. This is the truth. And if they can see it through me actually being present and being there, then they too can hopefully make the connection. So I started going to these slaughterhouse vigils where we would give the animals water and document the conditions of them on the truck before they were taken inside. And just I just, looking into their eyes, it's such a powerful and profound experience, because and they know too what's about to happen next. And this is not just happening in that one slaughterhouse. This is happening to millions of animals every single day, billions every single year. And so that slaughterhouse vigil led me to meet the director of Cave Light Films, which is an animal rights film company that documented one of the vigils that I used to attend. And that film, called The Saez Movement by Cave Light Films, if you look it up, it shows one of our vigils. And that film got over 20 million views. It reached worldwide, and it also it shed light onto what was happening to animals in that one little slaughterhouse in Newark, New Jersey. So then after that film was produced, I graduated college, and the director said to me, "Hey, like, do you want to maybe come and intern with me for the summer?" It was right into the summer of COVID. So I was like, "Yeah, sure. I have nothing better to do." And then we produced 5 films after that. And the second film we did was about the live animal wet markets, because during COVID, there was that
Yeah.
hook and that angle of, well, everybody's pointing the finger at China because of the live animal markets and the diseases that spread from there. And we said, well, what about the 80 plus live animal wet markets here in New York City? And that film got 10 million views. And then we had another film that was about an activist that was run over and trucked down outside of a slaughterhouse named Regan Russell. That film got 7 million views. And then lo and behold, they're sort of getting all this traction, and we were reaching outside of the vegan community. And that's kind of how my career started in film.
I love that. It seems like, just really quickly as well, how long have you been vegan? Just so I have that on record.
6.5 years.
6.5 years. Amazing. So I love the transition, especially what you mentioned before, because I've had George Martin on the show. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him, but as far as I know, he's a big fan of yours. And
I love him. Yeah.
his video I have with him is titled "Being Vegan is Not Enough," and it's what you mentioned at the beginning, which is like for the first 6 months, I was just quiet. I was in my corner, like I was doing the right thing, but I needed to be able to kind of fight back. So that's kind of like where I want to lead the next direction. So if you to think about like a spectrum of your form of activism, on one end you're doing absolutely nothing, you're vegan, and that's kind of the bare minimum. Another end could be what society would deem quote unquote extreme activism, which could involve some vandalism, some stuff like that. The most common person I can think of is potentially someone like Tash Peterson, if you've heard of her before. What are what are your thoughts on that form of activism? Like for me, it feels I have this huge sense that although they mean well and are correct, they may be damaging the cause. What are your thoughts?
I completely disagree. I think we
Yep.
need the extremes because then that leads us to also have the middle ground. If we didn't have the PETAs of the world and we didn't have the like humane societies of the world that are kind of just advocating for welfare, then there wouldn't be, I think, that kind of attention. I think that Tosh actually does get a lot of people thinking.
Mm.
And I don't think that her out at a protest was going to be the difference of somebody going vegan or not. Likelihood is they were never going to go vegan in the first place. So I think that it really does get people thinking. And sometimes it does take that kind of level of activism because people don't want to listen. They're like
Mm.
zombies. They're stuck in their ways. And the only thing that will wake people up and get media attention is sometimes actions like that.
Yep.
So I think of the Coach fashion show disruption, for example, which is where my friend and I hopped onto the runway during New York Fashion Week, and I held a sign that said "Leather Kills," and she was body painted as a skinned animal.
Mm.
And if when we had taken the kind approach, the educational approach, they weren't listening to us.
Mhm.
PETA presented Coach multiple times with undercover investigation footage, with stats and figures saying this is unsustainable, this is cruel to animals, please change, please start using vegan leather, and they wouldn't do anything about it. So
Mm.
these type of actions, in my opinion, are a last resort to get people to wake the F up. Like this is not a problem of, oh, we can solve it in 20 years from now. Life on Earth is at risk, and we have to act like our lives depend on it. And that's what we're doing.
Absolutely. That being said, as well, it sounds like the different forms of activism. I love also what you mentioned as well. It's a last resort. I do definitely agree that there is kind of place for everything. Just to give an example, Vegan Gains had a huge effect on me, and he was definitely seen as an extreme vegan. But he got to people like me, which was, I think, very very important. Is there any form of activism that you think may not be helpful, or does every kind of form of activism have its place?
I mean, I think it's important to take a deep breath before you start speaking. I think if possible, if somebody's asking you questions, I always do try to remain as calm as I can. I mean, it comes to a point where you're just like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, why do I have to explain to you that plants don't have feelings and that animals are sentient beings that shouldn't have their heads chopped off? It's ridiculous. And it like pisses me off, Like it comes to a point where you can only take it for so long. I will say though, I think it's super important as activists to stick together and to
Mm.
not criticize others for doing the best that they can.
Yeah.
Because I find that there's a lot of keyboard warriors on there that are like, you should have done it this way, you should do it that way. And it's like, well, what are you doing to help the animals? And if you find that that's more effective, then do it. I
Mm.
applaud you. I'm not going to stand here and force my way of activism down your throat. Like, I
Mm.
think that doing nothing is no good. And I think that if you're trying and you're doing something, you will reach people.
Absolutely. I've seen some of your interactions on YouTube, and I'm very pleased to see that some people, not everyone, obviously, they do seem to kind of stay there with the conversation. Whereas in others, like you said, they just tend to want to run away because they realize they're in a corner and they can't defend themselves. Do you feel like those people have a bigger seed planted in their head compared to the people that listened? What are your thoughts on that? Yeah.
Definitely. I think that it really just depends how many times the people have been hit with the message along the way. And there's three different stages of truth. I think the first stage is opposition. The second stage is violent oppression. So they're really trying to fight it. And then the third stage is actually acceptance.
Mm.
So I remember before I went vegan, I don't think I was ever violently oppressing it or opposing it, but I do remember getting a little defensive. Like I was pescatarian for a while where I ate fish. Ugh, so gross.
Yeah.
But I ate fish, and when somebody confronted me and said, "Why are you still eating those animals? They feel pain, they suffer." I find it super weird that you know, really stopped eating meat because you like animals, yet you eat fish. It makes no sense. And dairy and eggs, right?
Mm.
So at first I said to her, "It's different. You don't understand." Like I made all of these things up in my head to try to justify my actions. And I remember getting a little pissed off. And then it sat with me for a sec. And then I was like, wait, actually, she's right. And then 3 weeks later, I decided to go vegetarian. And then I went vegan after learning the information about the dairy and the egg industries.
Yep. Absolutely. I think that's how a lot of people take those steps. For myself, I was vegetarian for about 2 months or so. And then I was like, wow, I feel like I'm causing more pain and suffering to the animals because I'm replacing my meat with more dairy and eggs. And
Yeah.
I was aware of what was happening in the dairy and egg industry. So yeah, I think that's the kind of stepping stones that a lot of people take. So I think we can both agree that we live in a non-vegan world. I think that's without question. This is a very strange question, and it's the first time I've asked anyone. But how do you keep yourself accountable when so many people are fighting you back against veganism?
I think when you become an activist, you just have to stop caring so much what people think about you. And I think also we have to analyze, is what I'm doing effective? So I do look at feedback, I do read through certain messages, but it does come to a point where I don't always go into the comment section, because as soon as those bacon comments start rolling in, or as soon as those like really
Mm,
just ridiculous meat eater comments start rolling in, I just know that then it's reaching outside. And I always say to myself, I think no response is more concerning, because at least they're seeing it and they're engaging with it. Something was triggered in their brain to make them feel the need to respond to it. So I've just developed thick skin over time. And I think, as I said before, developing those practices of like knowing when to take a break and when to go to a yoga class, when to write in your journal, meditate, and really work on your inner self. That is so important as an activist, because, yeah, it can get really toxic and really hard. Like I even have family members that have completely unfollowed me, unfriended me from social platforms. And it becomes like a thing where you can become very isolated. And I've found that over these years, my activists and my vegan family I've just become so close with. And so it's unfortunate, but I think that this is just what comes with it. And I know that we are on the right side of history. There is no doubt in my mind that what we are saying and speaking up for is the right thing to do.
mm.
And so this is what I've chosen to dedicate my life to. And I think eventually my hopes are that those people that have unfriended me, that one day they'll wake up.
Absolutely. I think I definitely like that was actually one of my future questions that was going to come up about the understanding how you deal with things on social media. And it kind of takes like what I think, as far as I understand, it's like occasionally, responding to comments, but potentially from someone who's actually uh, structured their comment as a question as opposed to a bacon emoji or something like that, right? And separating yourself from that. I really want to touch on what you've also mentioned about, being on the right side of history, which is actually a question we've spoke like we often get people with objections about veganism, which is like our ancestors did this, it's part of our culture, been doing it for hundreds of years. That's kind of looking in the past. So I kind of want to look into the future for this one. What's your prediction? There's no right or wrong answer here, but what is your prediction of veganism? Because to give you my example, I think veganism is on a hyperbolic curve, meaning that it's just going to have a tipping point and it's just going to go almost overnight, if you feel it that way. What's your kind of thoughts on the future of veganism?
Yeah, I think in any form of activism, you have to remain optimistic, because why else am I fighting? Why else am I speaking up against this every single day and doing what I do? So I do agree. I think we have to reach a certain percentage of the population before it becomes a normalized way of living and lifestyle in our society. So that being said, I think also it might not, I think we will reach a point in society where it's the norm. You will have to request meat as opposed to request the vegan option. I think things will become a default vegan option. And we're beginning to innovate more. The vegan options are only getting more sustainable, more delicious, and fortunately, the animal products are just staying the exact same. They are unsustainable, they are cruel. There's no humane way to kill someone that doesn't want to die. So I think the future of meat will actually become cultivated meat, where it's grown from cells from animals. So instead of taking an animal and having to raise them and slaughter them, we will just grow meat in a laboratory. And this is not a new technology. This is something that we already do in hospitals for organs. And this is something where we can actually level the amount of cholesterol and saturated fat. So it will be a healthier option. And so if we can't get people to stop eating meat, I think we need to take away their choice through laws and legislation and ban it or put a tax on it, and instead offer them a cruelty free meat that is the same as animal flesh, except nobody had to get hurt for it.
Absolutely. To bring it back to that, the what you mentioned before as well about having to choose meat. I used to work in a pub, and occasionally someone would order a coffee, and I would say, "What kind of milk would you like?" And they would say normal, and I would be like, "So which plant-based milk would you like?" And I would be like, "That in my mind is the normal one." Uh,
Normal.
Based off that, just this isn't even a planned question. Do you think in our lifetime we're going to have a stage where normal milk is the plant-based option?
I've already seen it in some coffee shops in New York City.
Amazing.
I've seen it. I mean, I think in our lifetime we're going to see great strides. It's hard to say if we'll see total animal liberation. I hope
Mm,
so, but I I think in terms of the dairy industry, it is collapsing. It is failing. They are desperate and
mhm.
they're trying everything by putting out more false advertising, more lies. They're trying to use the marathon and runners in the marathon by literally just using their faces and saying that they drink milk when none of those people actually drink milk. And not only that, but I think it's something upwards of like 70% of people are lactose intolerant. It's just like, buddy, you're failing here. And with social media and undercover investigations, people are starting to know the truth. And the dairy industry, especially milk products, we will see an end to that. I'm sure of it.
Yeah, absolutely. You've touched
Ugh.
on your sort of, let's say, friends and family. You mentioned they've unfollowed you and all sorts of things, right? And fortunately, you've grown to kind of grow another family within the vegan movement. Just to touch on that, do you have any non-vegan friends or family in your life currently? And if so, how do you feel about them?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's hard because for me it was a process. I wasn't vegan my whole life, and 6.5 years ago I had eaten animal products most of my life and I just didn't know. So I do try to give people the benefit of the doubt. What's hard is that when they are presented with the information and they don't change, it's concerning to me and I don't fully understand it. I don't shy away from speaking up. I don't shy away from making my morals and ethics known. And my family and friends that I'm still close with that are not vegan, they are very supportive of coming to only vegan places with me. They know the drill, they know what's going on. And I mean, I again, like I try to give them give them a a little bit of a
Mm,
push, because then it's like if I'm no longer in their lives, then they're really not hearing the message at all. So I think that there's a time and a place. Like I know when to tone it down a little bit because there's different people that need different approaches. So some people, it might be really helpful if you go really hard on them and you're like, you're a murderer, like you are
mm.
murdering animals. That was really the only thing that woke me up personally. And I might have gotten defensive at first, but some people need that hard approach. Whereas some people, they just need a little gentle approach where I all I can say is I'm a resource if you need it. I recommend you do your own research.
Absolutely. And yeah, well, we've had also some guests on this show as well. And that kind of extension of family is kind of like these people that are close to you, don't really get to choose who they are. Friends, you do get to choose, and your partners as well, you do get to choose. And I've even had a conversation with people who've had non-vegan partners on the show who are vegan. And it's a very difficult conversation. What's your stance? Like, could you have a partner who's non-vegan? Like, would it have to be from day one? Like, where would you draw the line?
I would draw the line when things start to become more serious. So once you become like in a committed relationship and you're planning on spending your life with this person, I just find it hard to stay with them if they don't go vegan, because it's like our morals and our values don't align. And
Mm,
that will always be a big disconnect. So I'll give you an example. My boyfriend now, currently, he was not vegan when we started dating. And it was just kind of casual at first. I was just like, I don't see this really going anywhere unless he changes. But I had to remember that if I stood there and forced it on him, he would resent me. And
Mm.
then he wouldn't change because he believed it was the right thing to do. And ultimately, the goal here is not to have him sneaking cheese behind my back. Like, I wanted him to go vegan because he believed it was the right thing to do. So I think the right partner in any circumstance will support you and will be open to hearing you and listen to you, and also be open to attending some actions that are important to you. So, for example, like my boyfriend, he came to a slaughterhouse with me. He came to different talks and demonstrations. He knew what he was getting himself into as well. Like, I'm not just a vegan, I'm an activist.
Mm.
And I'm not going to stop what I'm doing because I'm in a relationship with you, you know? And so he was very aware of that. And I made it clear. And from the beginning, I set my boundaries. And
Mm.
my boundaries were I don't want to see it. Those products are not allowed in my house. And when we are together, you will be vegan. And that was like my boundary. What he did outside of when we were together, I couldn't control that. But over time, I think it was the course of like 6 months to a year, he ultimately transitioned and is now vegan, ethically, morally, spiritually, for his health. And that brought us so much closer.
Amazing. I love that. A lot of people, my partner is vegan as well, and everyone kind of thinks that she influenced me because get this, I'm the man, right? It's a crazy concept, but I was actually vegan far before she was. I don't really have any studies to back it up, but to me, and I don't know if you agree, it seems that there are far less vegan men out there. Why do you think that is?
Well, that's, I think, a question that kind of delves deep into like the politics of meat. There's
Mm.
actually a book written about it, and it talks about how there's these concepts of meat is manly and like this toxic masculinity where when you're with your bros and you want to fit in and be a part of the social norm, there's it's harder because I feel like these men are supposed to or made to feel like they have to be strong and that meat gives them muscles and that it's a manly thing to do. And you see all these jokes about soy boys and that soy gives you boobs and that your compassion and empathy is mistaken for weakness. And in my opinion, I think it's the complete opposite. I think by going vegan as a man, it is the sexiest thing to do because you're speaking up for the vulnerable. I think the strong should protect the weak. And I think it says a lot about a person who oppresses someone that is more vulnerable than you.
Exactly, and I see so many people on social media who have been like, the man needs to protect the woman, and it's like, like regardless of what you think about that, it's like, why are we oppressing the vulnerable, especially these innocent animals? If that's your
Right.
principle, it doesn't make any sense. My next question is very confronting. Some people find it very easy, some people find it very difficult to answer. I'll leave this up to you. No real right or wrong. Are vegans better than non-vegans?
I mean, yeah. I think in terms of mindful consumption, I think in terms of every day living their truth and through our everyday actions trying to make the world a better place, yes, most vegans do try to do that. I will say there's always, rotten tomato in every bunch.
Mm.
Not all vegans are completely ethically sound. I'm sure there's vegans that have done a lot of immoral actions. But in terms of are vegans better than non-vegans to the animals, I would say so. We are not eating them. We're not, paying for their confinement, for their forceful insemination, for their uh, slaughter ultimately, right? So I think I'm better now than I was before, but there's also non-vegans that I'm sure are doing a lot in other categories too. So
Yep.
from my perspective, going vegan has only made me more aware of other movements and more aware of my consumption. So
Mm.
if somebody said to me, "Hey, Jamie, by you buying that product, that is going to cause harm to these children, living in a developing country. Please don't buy that." I would say, "Sure, no problem.
Yep.
Like, you're right. I'm not going to buy it." Right. So it's this wanting to do better, striving to do better, and we're not perfect. There's no way to be perfect in a non-vegan world. Some of my actions might cause harm, whether it's driving a car, flying a plane, right? But every day I strive to do better.
Absolutely. I definitely agree with that. And also, I almost kind of use veganism to explain the umbrella term for many things. Since I've been vegan, I've been able to understand other things better because I don't want to be a hypocrite. I don't want to be part of other problems if I'm trying to solve another problem, right?
Yeah.
Um, I'm wary of time, but I've got one more question before we do a bit of a sign off. If you could only make one statement on why someone should go vegan to create the largest impact, what would it be and why?
So going vegan, in my opinion, is the biggest thing that you can do every single day as an individual to help the planet, the animals, and yourself. And it also is just a gateway to making the world a better place in so many other ways. It was seriously the best decision I have ever made in my entire life. It was just a matter of aligning the morals I always had as a kid, loving animals, with my actions. And if I can do it, literally anybody can. I'm normal, just like everyone else. I grew up eating meat, I grew up eating animals, and I woke up to this truth. And now through my everyday actions, I'm striving to do better every day. So please consider it. Use me as a resource.
Absolutely. I love that, Jamie. And also, not so much a question, but anyone who's watching who is been inspired by the passion that I can hear in your tone of voice, um, where can people find you? Where can they watch your 6 short films? I'm going to put everything in description, but just really quickly in your own words, where's the best place to catch you?
Sure. So my Instagram is at It's Jamie's Corner. You can go to my website, itsjamiescorner.com. If you wanted to watch some of the films that I've worked on, it's at cavelightfilms.com/the animal issue. And all of the 6 films will be on there. And if you go to my website, you can find my contact on there. Shoot me an email. Sometimes that's better than Instagram DM. But I really appreciate all of you for listening, and I really appreciate you as well. Thank you.
No, thanks to you, honestly. And again, just to kind of reiterate, everything that you've mentioned, I will put in the description below. So please go check out Jamie. She's doing fantastic stuff. I'm going to end the recording there, and I'll see you on the other side, Jamie. Thank you.
Okay. Thank
Bye.
you.